Who are the most hated Padres in the 2020s? Well, we got Javier of Locked On Padres. So I can tell you the Padres I hate the most since the year 2020 started, and he'll tell you the D-backs he hates the most since 2020. All on today's Locked On Diamondbacks crossover.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, without further ado, to talk about the most hated players on our respective teams since 2020, I'll tell you the Padres I hate the most. He'll tell you the D-backs he hates the most since 2020 has started. So let's bring on the man of the hour, Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great, man. It's funny because when originally we were doing this, I thought we were actually going to talk about our own players. But I'm excited to talk about each other's players and kind of give it's a hater's guide. You know what I mean? We're being haters today. And every now and then I think that is not only important, but just vitally necessary for survival. You have to let a little bit of hate out. Even though, frankly, the real team that I think both of us hate, that we would love to talk about players that we hate, is the Dodgers. But even still, we do crossovers all the time, so I think it'll be fun. And I'll probably end up going on a diatribe about a Padres player that everyone knows I've gone on plenty of diatribes about by the end of this. But even so, sir, as always, I am thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I think we both we could probably do a whole hour podcast on guys we hate from the LA Dodgers, most likely, but that is not what we're doing today. And I think whenever we get together, we're not afraid to lean into the haterism or the trollingism when it comes to doing these crossovers. I think it's a lot of fun sometimes to talk a little bit from the hateful side. And we always do that on these podcasts. We're going to do that on today's crossover, but we're going to actually start off with something positive. Javi and I are each going to give you an under the radar player to watch out for this spring training because pitchers and catchers, of course, report to camp this week. And so, Javi, I want to hear one under the radar San Diego Padre guy, not Manny Machado, not Fernando Tatis, but who should D-backs fans keep their eye on this spring training?
I think that the player, it's between a bunch of different guys because I've talked about on my show. For people who don't know, Locked On Padres, of course, check it out wherever. I think that this is the most exciting, or at least maybe not exciting isn't the word, just the most interesting spring training the Padres have had in a while, because typically they're a team that's making the big superstar moves. You know, we got Xander Bogaerts in training camp, or the one year when it was like a total, like the Avengers were assembly. You get Darvish and you get Snell and you get Ha-Seong Kim. But now it's more about prospects for once. And I think that that's where it starts. And for me, it's between a few different guys. Don't get me wrong. I think there's actually some interesting pitchers to keep an eye out too. But I think the number one guy has to be Jackson Merrill, their top overall non-Ethan Salas prospect. I don't even know if he counts as under the radar, frankly, which is why I'm going to give one more tiny mention here, just because he is the number one overall prospect by most people on this team. Ethan Salas technically being number one, but he's a ways away. He's still like 18 years old, right? So Jackson Merrill could very well be the starting outfielder for this team this year, specifically in center. They've been talking about him. Go check out. There was a piece in The Athletic talking about how he's, going to be playing in the outfield, how he's preparing to play in all sorts of positions, from second to short to left to out to center field. So they're trotting him out everywhere. So he's the guy to look out for sure, because this could be the starting center fielder. He's got a really good bat to ball type of ability. And then I'd say the other one to keep an eye on is Jacob Marcy, because he could also be potentially a guy that makes the opening day roster because of the Padres' questions in center field and left field specifically. And he won the MVP of the Arizona Fall League last year. Granted, it might have been a little bit fraudulent, only because some scouts say it was the worst pitching that they'd seen down there in like a decade. But even still, that's like a little bit more of an unknown, right? So I think it's the Padres outfield guys, Jackson Merrill being the obvious one, and then someone like Jacob Marcia being another one to keep an eye on.
Okay, Jackson Merrill sounds like a little mini Mookie over there. Could play a little infield, can play a little outfield
I
for
mean,
this
you said
Padres
it.
team. Yeah,
You
hey,
said it. Hey,
hey,
you
we'll
said it.
see. I mean, Padres are definitely a team that I consider a little top heavy. So if you can get some more quality depth pieces in there, like a
Mhm.
Jackson Merrill, because the Padres do have a pretty good farm system in terms of top end talent. So maybe you start to matriculate some of those guys in, considering you have so many fat contracts on your books over the next few years. You're going to need some of that young talent to come in, be cheap, and play well at the same time. So maybe those are the kind of guys that can help this next era of Padres baseball. From the D-back side, I also was going to give something along the same lines because the first guy I was going to bring up was actually the D-backs top prospect as well, Jordan Lawler. He's someone that did have a small cup of coffee with the D-backs last year, but he only had like 30 at bats or less, if even that. And he didn't look good with the D-backs last year. He was only 20 years old. They kind of rushed him through the minor league system. He dealt with injuries. He had a very good AA and AAA last year, then had a cup of coffee with the D-backs. He's someone to watch out for just because D-backs, of course, have their all-star in Geraldo Perdomo at shortstop, but he is more of a bridge guy than a long-term option. So the battle for backup shortstop is going to be big this spring training, and Jordan Lawler seems like the best candidate among that bunch. If you want a second name, just so you're not just looking at the top prospect for the D-backs as an obvious guy, a former top prospect for the D-backs, Christian Robinson, a lot of off the field issues, had a problem getting a visa, didn't play baseball from 2020 to 2022, but this was the D-backs number one prospect for multiple years. From 2020, 2021, he was the D-backs number one guy ahead of the Corbin Carrolls, ahead of the Alec Thomases, and he hadn't played baseball since 2019, came back this past season, 900 plus OPS, showed the power, showed the speed once again. So D-backs looking for a fourth outfielder to come out this spring training. Jake McCarthy feels like he has the lead on that competition, but Christian Robinson, as a former number one guy in the system, I think he's someone to watch out for. So for both the D-backs and Padres, sounds like we got some interesting candidates coming out the woodwork. Do you think you expect to see a lot of youngsters for the Padres this year? Do you think you will see
Definitely.
the okay? You think you're gonna
Yeah.
see a little transition this season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be a full transition. I still think
Mhm.
that there's a chance because they're around 166 million right now. A lot of reports say 200 million is kind of like the max. So I think they could go out and get themselves a Michael A. Taylor and Adam Duvall as a bubble just pop
Yeah,
next
what
to him.
was
Did you
that?
see that?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was like, "What is that?" I was like, "You
Even
got
you were
some."
like, "What was that?"
I was like,
I
"You
don't
got
know
some
what just
crazy
happened.
graphics over there, Javi. What are they paying you on graphics now?"
I don't know, man, but I guess they agree with what I'm saying. For video listeners, go check that out. I think that with this team, it's going to be one of those things where you just see a lot of guys get tryouts. I think at the major league level, and don't get me wrong, like I said, Michael A. Taylor, Adam Duvall are just some players. There's still some trade candidates out there, particularly in right field, if they want to make a trade for, say, an Anthony Santander, guys like that, and then you move Tatis from right field to center field. That could happen, although maybe it's a little bit doubtful. But even still, I think that you're going to get a lot of young, just brand new faces. Jackson Merrill, like I said, he could be the starting center fielder. It's not impossible. A little bit unlikely, but not impossible. Graham Pauley, you know what I mean? All these, they have
Mm,
so many prospects of young guys for a team that's made so many trades to be able to retool their farm system, not to be like, the degree that the Orioles have, but to just be like really solid and have a lot of high potential guys and some decent floor and just good overall depth is a testament to manager AJ Peller's acumen as a scout. So I really think that this is going to be one of those years. And while that might make people upset that it's unproven talent, they just got to all contribute a little bit. You know what I mean? 1-win
mm.
players, 0.8 win players. That stuff adds up. That's why the Dodgers are really good. They're good at, obviously, the stars is the biggest part, but it's also like, guys, they found Jason Hayward last year. They got James Outman. Those guys, those 2.5 type of win players, they add up. That's why the Diamondbacks were good. You
Mm.
can't just have stars only. You know what I mean? You need to have those guys who help you through the dog days, man. Like that's the crazy thing. Like there's going to be times where you're just guys aren't playing well and you need a little bit of a change up, and that's what you do it for. So lots to be excited about when it comes to the young crop, the young up and comers, the future stars, dare I say, of the San Diego Padres.
Future draft trade chips for the San Diego Padres and AJ Preller. As soon as those guys start to hit their potential, let's get them out the door. Let's bring in the next wave of stars. That's the
Yeah.
San Diego Padres way. We'll be talking and I guess kind of drafting our most hated players off our respective teams coming up in segments number 2 and number 3. But if you want to bet on which of our teams can win the NL West in 2024, Javi, where's the best place to do that?
I don't know, man. You tell me.
Okay,
No, I
FanDuel
know, I know,
Sportsbook.
I know.
He knows, guys. He knows it's FanDuel because they take Javi's money every single week because Javi loves placing those basketball parlays down
I love it, man.
because he loves it, man. Because right now, he's not a new customer, but you can be because new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I'm a big same game parlay guy. Whenever the Lakers are playing, give me 80 over in points, 80 over in rebounds, and that Lakers money line. Now, listen, that third leg of the parlay, the Lakers money line doesn't always hit, but when it does, it feels good to see money enter my enter my bank account and not leave it for one. So if you want money in your bank account, just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks crossover with the Locked On Padres host Javier Reyes. And now we're going to be doing a little draft power ranking type thing. Not exactly in order, but we're going to be taking the players off each of each other's respective teams. The guys that have brought us the most frustration, the guys that we may, just sports hate, but have hate against these players. Again, just in the sports world, just as fans, the malice toward these guys as fans, because maybe it was a big moment, maybe it was a trash talk, whatever it was. And then we're only keeping this to the players that we've seen since we've taken over these podcasts. So I think we both started during the pandemic, right? The 2020 season. Was that your first year?
Yeah. And it's funny because there's been some crossover, like even before this, right? Like, when Ian Kennedy was a Padre for a little bit, and then he was a Diamondback for a little bit. Like, there's been some similar players, but like, it's funny that like it's one of those things because I don't subscribe to the belief that you have to hate teams because they're in your division. I think you can sports hate them because it's like, let's say if you go to, I don't know, I can't think of another comparison right now, but it's not the same. It's like Yankees, Red Sox versus Yankees, Orioles. It's like, yeah, Yankees, Orioles, they don't like each other, but it's not the same as Yankees, Red Sox, man. You know what I mean? And that's how I kind of feel about the Diamondbacks, where it's been sports hate. You know what I mean? Like, a really like, we hate you, but like, it's not like as personal, and we don't get that crazy about it. When it comes to the Dodgers, man, that's when it gets rough. That's when it gets rough. And dare I say, even the Rockies a little bit more, only because of the infamous Matt Holliday thing. But really excited to talk about it, man. I will redeem myself for my weird glitch in my brain when you were trying to lead into the segue for the FanDuel ad.
No, you're good. No, you're all good. Yeah, why not just get right into the draft then? I actually think I saw a thing on Twitter last week saying, you know what, the Yankees-Orioles rivalry sneakily bigger than the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry. I was like,
really?
I don't know. I don't know if I
Maybe
believe
modern day. Maybe modern day you could argue that. Just because it's tough. It's tough. No, I don't know, man. The Yankees Red Sox is crazy. Like,
all
that's
right,
gang type stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm gonna take a coin here.
Mm.
Let's see. Heads or tails, Javi? I mean, I think you want to go with tails, of course.
Yeah, I always go tails, man.
I don't have a quarter today. I have some sort of euro. So we'll make this side's
Traveling, man.
heads. Yeah. And we'll make that side's tails.
Okay.
Okay. For the people. And we got heads. All right. It looks like I'm going first. But again, it's not a draft, so it doesn't really matter in this one. So.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, who
cares? More about the pride on the line. I feel like the 49ers. I'm taking the ball first, guys.
Too soon.
Shout out San Francisco. Hey, they just got Jorge Soler. That should make up for the Super Bowl loss. You guys woke up to news. They just got a guy. I saw some crazy stat saying, real quick tangent, the Giants haven't had a 30 home run guy since 2004. That's insane.
You probably saw that from Just Baseball Media, that I contribute to. Everyone go check it out. It's a great website. It was Barry Bonds in 2004. That's crazy. And next closest was Brandon Belt, I believe, in 2021. So that's wild. But yeah,
I was like, the Oakland A's
had don't matter.
Yeah, Oakland A's had Brent Rooker last year who had 30. You're telling me the Giants can't find one guy that had 30 home runs in the last 20 years? That's crazy.
Home runs don't matter.
Yeah, home runs don't matter. Back to the podcast.
Mhm.
Number one for me that I'm taking of guys I hate on the San Diego Padres since 2020. This is probably the most obvious guy on this list. I actually think he gets a lot of unwarranted hate, but just in terms of those rivalry matchup games, he's the guy that I feel like talks the most trash. He's the guy that I feel like and
Mhm.
just doing the most stuff when he's out there. I'm going not Fernando Tatis. I'm going Manny Machado. He's the
Yeah.
dude. Again, I think he gets a lot of unwarranted hate for being called lazy and all that. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff is unfair. But when he's going against this D-backs team and he's talking trash to our pitchers,
Yeah.
I feel like no one on the Padres is more braggadocious or like abrasive or
Mhm.
obnoxious than a Manny Machado. I actually like Manny Machado a lot when he's not going against the D-backs because I like all those intangibles he brings against the other matchups. But when it's against the D-backs and he's crushing 3-run bombs and
Yeah.
waving at our fans and talking crap to the pitchers, like
Yeah.
that's when I'm not a fan of Manny Machado. So he's probably the guy that gets me the most irritated when I'm watching him against my team.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the most hated players in the sport, probably
Mhm.
overall. And a lot of that, as I've talked about in this podcast before, and people get mad at me sometimes, but there is warrant for it. I think that the lazy narrative is what it is, lazy,
Yeah,
because
I
that's
agree with
he
that.
plays like every game. You know what I mean? So I think that's dumb. This is the same thing that happened with Robinson Cano with the Yankees, where it's like, guys, I love Tatis when he runs fast and stuff. Guess what? Sometimes those guys get hurt. So I don't mind a guy who smokes the ball almost harder than everyone to third base to not necessarily run super fast because he smoked it. Like they're not gonna, you know what I mean? It's not like a slow
Mhm.
dribbler. So is it every now and then? But he plays more games than literally everybody except for Paul Goldschmidt before he got hurt this year. So amazing stuff. But when it comes to the dirty play stuff, when it comes to being really braggadocious, but then being annoyed when the other team does it, shout out, I believe it was Bruised Our Gratterall in the playoffs a few years ago. Now, don't get me wrong, the Dodgers fans are full of it, bragging about how you beat us when our top two starters were out, whatever. That's the side of that. Bruised Our Gratterall, like pumping himself up and Machado
Mhm.
getting annoyed by that. It's like, we come on, we've been parading medallions and go slam Diego, so that was ridiculous. But I totally get it, and I think if we did this for literally every team, we were doing this draft for who
Mhm.
was your most hated Padre since 2020, it would easily every single person would probably say Manny
Machado?
Machado. Yeah, especially people who cover teams. Regular fans might say Tatis because people are still trying to pretend that steroids is the worst thing that an athlete could possibly do. Um, but other than that, it's Manny Machado for sure. I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if I actually have the most vitriol for him on this list. It's more of a combination of both talent and just his obnoxiousness at times that gives him number
Absolutely.
one. And also, I think the fan base would vote him number one. I think that's part of it. He may not be my personal number one, but he's high enough on my personal list with that fan base touch. He's going number one on my list. So, who's number
Totally
one for you,
understandable.
Javi?
Uh my pick is gonna be not the obvious one. I'm cooking
Okay.
that one. That one's
Okay.
laying in the stove. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's
Marinated.
heating up. It's marinating. Thank you. That's the right.
Okay.
It's Tommy Pham.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Little bit of a
Former
cheat,
Padre.
little
Former
bit of a
Padre.
cheat former Padre.
Okay.
I don't hate Tommy Pham as much as other people, but the atrocious vibes from this man cannot be understated. I think that it personally started with when he had his, and I'm not trying to make light of this at all, but he had a stabbing incident outside a club, I believe, in the middle of the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken. So some people were wondering, like, what are you doing there? And thankfully, he was okay. But he has some things. He might have some anger issues or what have you. So I don't want to be insensitive about it, but just really bad vibes, hulking around the dugout. We already saw what he did with Jack Peterson a couple of
Yeah.
years ago. That was a
New
whole
D
thing.
back.
By the way, please Giants or no, I'm sorry, please Diamondbacks, bring back Tommy Pham.
Hey, we might.
Please,
We've talked
please
about it.
give me the Pham Jock Peterson
Hey,
platoon at DH. That would make me almost root
that'd
for
be
you guys. That
crazy.
would be
That'd
so
be crazy.
funny. That'd be so good. But I remember, and I think it started from again the bad vibes. He was unbelievably bad in the clutch in the second half of their infamous 2021 collapse. So as a player, didn't succeed. The fact that he was the main piece of the Hunter Renfroe trade with the Rays, obviously they got Cronenworth out of it, which was nice. But even still, Pham also he had an incident when he ran into Ha-Seong Kim in the outfield, and people might remember this where they butted heads. It was bad, and I think a lot of people didn't like the vibe of the fact that he didn't even check on Kim and looked like he was just angry the whole time. Now, again, body language, I try not to read too much into body language with the athletes. I think that's a a wrong way to go about things. People process things differently, but I think that's where it started. And then the last piece of evidence for sure, this man hits against the Padres like his life depends on it, Millard. Like this dude hit like a home run when he was on the Reds. When he was on the Reds. I know that we're talking about Diamondbacks, but
Mhm.
he hit a home run into like the third deck. He never did anything remotely close to that when he was with the Padres. He hates the Padres. I am almost certain of it. This man hates us so much, and he, like I said, he just does really well against us. Combined with just the bad mojo overall, I think that a lot of Padres fans probably share this belief as well. He has an OPS of 930 hitting against the Padres, which is higher than nearly
Mhm.
every team with the exception of the Mets. Let's see, the Mets, Tigers, and the Reds. Those are the only other teams that he's hit better against. So
And
coincidence? I think not. So Tommy Pham's my first pick.
yeah, and just last year against the Padres, he had 947 OPS, and the most RBIs against any team was against the Padres with 10. So he did crush them last year on both the
Hates
Mets and
us.
D-backs. That's a fun pick there. I know everyone wants Tommy Pham to come back. There was a report last week that the D-backs are kind of, sniffing around the Tommy Pham market again to pair with Jock
Ooh.
Peterson. So that would be a pretty incredible pairing in the locker room. And it is funny to say that he's a bad locker room guy because when he came to the D-backs, he kind of flipped that narrative a little
Yeah.
bit. Like he had the World Series game too, where he
Mhm.
gave up an at bat so Jace Peterson can get his only at bat in the World Series. Like this
Yeah.
guy became selfless, and it's like, oh, everyone loves him
Yeah.
now. So it's funny that you like turned that whole script and narrative he had on him.
Like, you might just hate the Padres. And again, I don't hate him. I'm just saying that Padres fans certainly do. And it's just he hates us. Like the man just kills us every time. So hey, given the Padres clubhouse weird rumors and reports over the past few seasons, basically since we've both been hosting, maybe it's not without merit, right? Like maybe this
Mhm.
substantiates that belief a little bit more. Maybe it's not
Well,
him.
I'm gonna do something along the same lines here because for my number two guy that I'm taking that I hate, I'm taking Mark the Shark Melanson, okay, who was on the D-backs this past year collecting a check and didn't play, and then the previous year was pitching for the D-backs, supposed to be our answer to our closing problems the last few years. Did a 4.66 ERA. After coming
Mhm.
off the year, we made the All-Star team and led the league in saves with the San Diego Padres. The D-backs ninth inning was maybe
Uh,
their biggest weakness since I've taken over this podcast. I thought Mark the Shark Melanson was going to be the answer to our problems, and instead he was a double agent working for the Padres at the same time, collecting checks and just giving up home runs left and right. Mark the Shark was never the answer. I wanted him to be good so badly, and he would just not. And the thing is, this is the second time he burned me because I did grow up as a Red Sox fan. And when we look at his career, the only other time he was really terrible was that 1 year in Boston. So Mark the Shark, he has bit me twice in my fandom. As a baseball guy, he is number two on my list.
It's funny because Melanson, yeah, 2.23 ERA with the Padres, 39
Mhm.
saves, and then with the D-backs, it was immediate too, by the way.
Yeah,
And I remember seeing you tweet about it, and you were like, I can't stand this. It's
it was
really
bad,
frustrating
dude.
when players who age well, you're like, they keep doing it every year. And then your team acquires said player, and then they have the fall off finally. You know what I mean? Like that must be really, really maddening. It's like, say, the Nationals or the Padres with Nelson Cruz, right? Where it's like finally this guy fell off and just can't hit anymore. And it's when we got him, right? Instead of all those years, he was just quietly super effective for teams like the Mariners and the Twins. But yeah, man, I totally get it. He was great for us. Everyone loved sending around on Padres Twitter the picture of Don Orsillo, our play-by-play guy, holding
Mhm.
like a shark, like a mini sharkfish thing.
Okay.
And they'd always post that whenever he got a save. So I loved Melanson. I know Dodd certainly did the way he did on the calls. Really effective, like ground ball pitcher that aged really well, but that just killed the Diamondbacks and made them
Yeah.
have one of the worst bullpens. It just never had a closer until they traded for guys like Paul Sewald. So
Yeah, and like you said, it was immediate. In the month of May, his second month with the D-backs, he gave up 11 earned runs and 9
mm.
innings pitched, which is absolutely horrendous, 10.61 ERA. So I hate him. Number two on my list. Javi, who's number two for you?
The second one on my list is going to be a dumb one because I'm
Okay.
saving. I'm saving the big one. I gotta save it. This is dumb, and I'm gonna keep it brief. Christian Walker. Um, I
Christian
know,
Walker.
really dumb. The only
Okay.
reason I had him on my fantasy team in
Okay.
2022,
Yeah, he was bad.
and he was good. He's a good player. Hit
Oh,
36 home
2022.
runs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But do you know how maddening it was seeing one of the unluckiest players in the sport? It reminded me very much of Manny Machado in Baltimore at points. There was a season where Manny Machado was like the unluckiest player in baseball, and Christian Walker, if I'm not mistaken, had like a top 5 isolated power mark of all position players. He had a 248 BABIP in 2022, which is why he didn't get on base nearly as much as he should have, despite hitting 36 home runs and all that stuff. So he was getting really unlucky. It was just maddening to watch at points, but otherwise, love the guy. Dare I say, one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated, first baseman in all of baseball.
Oh, thank you. Ended that well. I thought you were gonna tell me you drafted him in 2021 when I was telling everyone he was gonna be the steal of the draft and then just
So I may or may not have drafted him that year as well.
okay. I was like, you took in 2022, you got the good Christian Walker late in the draft. But if you took
Yeah.
2021, oh, that one was a
He's
big
been good
miss.
for a while, man, too. This isn't like
Yeah.
a 1 year, basically since 2019.
Yeah.
Like
He's
he's had a WRC plus over 100 psych from 2021, which was weird. And he hits bombs, man. And
yeah.
Gold Glover. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. Man, I would love the universe in which the Padres had that instead of a certain first baseman they had for a while.
Well, Christian Walker is a pending free agent at the end of this season. So a
Yes,
big Christian
sir.
Walker year coming up for the D-backs. Will they re-sign him? Will they give him a big contract? Or will they try to develop one of these youngsters out their minor league system to be the next first baseman of the future? Javi and I will continue our draft of taking the most hated players from our respective teams. But if you want to catch D-backs and Padres games this season, the best place to buy tickets is, of course, Gametime, because Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices show your total upfront so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for big time savings. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, the Locked On Padres crossover, taking our most hated players from our respective teams since we took over the podcast in 2020, the pandemic shortened season.
Mhm.
I've taken Machado and I've taken Mark Melanson so far. You've taken who, Hobby?
I've taken Christian Walker and I've taken
Okay.
Tommy Pham.
Okay. Let's keep it going. I'm up with number 3. I
Go
don't
for it.
know. I don't know if I want to go with like a fun one or one that's like a real one.
Yeah.
I'll go with a guy that actually does irk me, but it's more because of his play against the D-backs. I'm going with Ha-Seong Kim. I don't know if this is a consensus among D-backs fans, but it's only because this dude, I feel like, murders the Arizona Diamondbacks. I feel like this is the dude that gets the clutchest hits. I remember a game last year, early in the season, D-backs were winning it late. D-backs were feeling good. Scott McGuff comes in the game to close, and Ha-Seong Kim is the one that wins it for the Padres. I feel like if there's a dude that comes up with runners in scoring position late in the game for the Padres to win, I think Ha-Seong Kim is actually the guy that I'm most scared of. I feel like he's the clutchest player on that Padres team that is loaded with stars. So Ha-Seong Kim, off the field guy, looks great, Javi. I know you're upset with that pick, but it's because I feel like he crushes the D-backs in the clutch in those high leverage situations. So I'm going with Ha-Seong Kim, number 3 most hated guy. Stop getting the big hits against the D-backs, please.
Number 1. You see, I did that thing where I pretended I was frozen.
I thought
Number
for a
1.
second, I was like, God, do I got to refresh? What's going
My
on?
shirt says I love you on it. That is no longer true.
Okay. I
Number
apologize.
2,
I'm hurt.
me being upset is hilarious considering how I've just been writing and talking about how the Padres need to trade Ha-Seong Kim over the last week. So I know a lot of people are probably saying, "Oh, you don't get to claim him anymore." So that's it. And number 3 is just that I get it. And Ha-Seong Kim has really been like one of the more clutch players on the team, particularly last year. Last year he was one of the only players on the team that kind of consistently just didn't get like massively worse whenever players were in what's the word in scoring position. In high
Mhm.
leverage situations last year, he actually, from low leverage situations, he had a 108 WRC plus, high leverage 129. So he
Okay.
actively got better in those situations. So you're not just saying that. So there's some stats to back that up. But of course, you can't help but like the guy. I mean, let's be real
Yeah,
here.
you
He's the
like him,
man.
yeah.
I know. Hey,
Good
this
guy,
is part of the
sure.
bit. I get it, but yeah, he does. He is a little bit of a Padre killer. I forgot who's the Padre killer. Not the Padre killer, Diamondback killer. And I know that there's some Padres killers on your team, for sure. That I actually am not going to draft, Millard.
Mm,
For my
that's a
next
surprise.
pick,
Yeah, who are you taking?
I'm going to go with a real one, not as much of a joke one.
Okay.
And I'll go back to joke, and then we'll finish with the big one.
Okay.
Tyler Gilbert.
Wow. Okay, okay,
Tyler Gilbert.
Keegan. Alright.
2021 was a dark time. It was dark. It was sad. This year was somehow worse. But 2021, I sat there on a Saturday night watching this man who was making his first ever start
Mhm.
throw a no-hitter against my Padres. Millard,
Yeah.
the hat's right here. I could bring it out if I want to, believe me. But I just I'm going to end it there. It was such
Okay, yeah.
I think that one thing right there, as well as the Machado Tatis fight that went viral, I think that is such a perfect microcosm of that season. You got no hit by a guy who's making his major league debut. And it's not like not even trying to be mean to the guy. Like, it's not like this was Steven Strasburg, like
Mm-mm.
one of those high level prospects that
No.
everyone's like, oh man, this is going to be the next one. No, it was some guy, the Diamondbacks were like, yeah, let's call this guy up. We like him, whatever. Let's see what he does. And he throws a no hitter. Like, it's just like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
We
he's not even a prospect like the D-backs are in love with. Like, he's a guy who, like, tops out at 90 miles an hour when it comes to his fastball. He's one of those sinker ball trying to just pitch to contact, get some ground ball type pitchers. And somehow he did good enough in terms of doing all that, just producing ground balls to lead to a no-hitter against the San Diego Padres. Honestly insane. Probably the highlight of the D-back season during 2022. D-backs, of course, didn't make the postseason, but it wasn't as bad as their 52 win year, just a year prior. So Tyler Gilbert will live on in infamy with the Arizona Diamondbacks because of that no-hitter against the San Diego Padres.
Yeah,
So,
man.
and I don't think you'll be seeing him much more going forward, unfortunately, Javi. That might have been the peak of his career, that first start against the San Diego Padres. So
Might have been.
don't know if we'll be seeing much more Gilbert going forward. Next up on my list, I'll go back with the real one. This is a guy who kind of got, I was a little bit surprised when he got his most recent extension because he is on the wrong side of 35, a pitcher, but he's been around a long time as a big time ace. But I just hate the way he looks when he's in the zone against the D-backs. I'm going with Pooh Darvish. I got that nickname from one of my coworkers. Pooh Darvish. I got him because I just hate the way he looks in terms of his confidence, his long lankiness. He does have kind of like a little confidence, like a little arrogance to him as well, that when he gets crushed at the plate, I'm absolutely ecstatic because Darvish is just one of those guys. When he's in the zone, I don't like the way he looks. He makes me physically irritated when he's on his game. And so I'm taking Pooh Darvish here. I loved it a couple years ago. There was there was like a little stretch. Oh, it was like the post sticky stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like Darvish was crushing the D-backs in the first half of the season. All of a sudden we had that crackdown, the sticky stuff, and the D-backs starting to get to Darvish right after that. That made me really enjoy it as a fan, seeing the D-backs crush Darvish after he was dominating against the D-backs. Pre-sticky stuff, post-sticky stuff, the D-backs were able to get to him. So I'm taking Darvish, number 4 on my list.
I like how this was one of your, out of all the ones you've done so far, just I don't like him out of everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not like
like
anything. Just to defend Darvish for a quick second, sticky stuff wasn't a merchant,
No.
and I don't think anyone was really a merchant, except for who was that closer? Oh man, he was on the Guardians. He's the only one I've seen that was genuinely a merchant for the sticky stuff for a couple of years. That's the only thing that made him good. Dang it. I forgot his name. James Karinchak. That was one. And he was out of the majors for a little bit. Then he came back in 2 years and was good again. But I get it. Darvish had an injury as well, which impacted him. But yeah, he was a sticky stuff guy at one point. I get it. I get it. You got it. You just got to be a hater. You sound like someone that starts to hate their significant other, and they start. You
Yeah.
know that they do because they start bringing up reasons that are like dumb. Like I hate the way you open the toaster that way. You know, like
The way I just hate the way he looks when he's
yeah,
dominating the
yeah,
D-backs.
like it's just
Even though
weird
they
look.
look silly when he gives up a home run. He makes like a very silly face. So he's a great meme guy when gives up like a long two.
Yeah, yeah,
Great
yeah.
meme
He's got some
guy.
meme potential. Speaking of meme potential, my next one before we get to the big boy for my most hated diebacks is Dalton Varsho. Do you know
Okay.
why? Do you know
Why? Yeah.
why? Number one, first of all, I remember you texting me after fantasy draft, begging me to give you Dalton Varsho,
Mm.
which is part of this. It was just very funny that you were like, "Give him to me, or else." Like, what do you? This is my one guy. I am so mad, irrationally mad, the same way you were irrationally mad at you, Darvish, that you guys gave up this dude. Who I'm going to pull up his numbers right now. You gave up this man who had, let me just check really, really quick here to make sure that I get this correct. A 107 WRC plus.
Mm.
Fine. Now,
Elite.
granted, 4.8 F4. Good player. And you were able to turn that into who, Millard? Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No, it is.
Why? What
Fleece.
are we doing here? What are we doing here? You know what I mean? It's just frustrating. It's just frustrating that they were able to turn him. And what does he do? 2.1 F4, largely
Yeah.
basically because of his defense, 85 WRC plus, only 20 home runs compared to 27 the year before. Just why can't we have one of those? Okay,
It's
ignore Tatis for a second. I know we had a huge one of the version of the thievery type of trade, but even still, just like come on, we could really use one of those right now. Come on, Blue Jays, trade with us,
and
please.
I understood at the time for the Blue Jays. Mostly it was because of his defense. I mean, you looked at the FanGraph
Yeah,
stuff; it was like running away with the defensive metrics out in the outfield. And then plus the guy, you're like, if everything goes right, 30-30 potential, you know. And it just didn't work out his 1 year in Toronto. Maybe sometimes we say that second season players need to adjust. So we'll see Varsho's second season in Toronto. But man, what a deal by the D-backs. Lourdes Gurriel, Gabriel Moreno, both integral to their run
yeah.
to the World Series. So very
And
happy
that's
for
the
the
other thing. You
D-backs.
even got Lourdes Gurriel too.
Yeah.
It's just like come
Beautiful.
on.
We got both. We got our starting left fielder for the next few years and the catcher for the next decade. Beautiful job by Mike Hazen and their
Amazing,
front office.
amazing.
No, okay. Let's round out our list here. I know who you're going to take for your final player on
Mhm.
your list. The final player on my list is just another one of those kind of like you, Darvish. Don't have a strong reason. I'll be honest. I don't like the Padres franchise, but when I actually tried to dwindle it down to players, I was like, I don't feel like I have that much
Yeah,
animosity toward a lot of these guys.
yeah.
It's more just the whole franchise itself when they're clicking. I don't like, but individually, probably not too much. But the next guy on my list, Will Myers. I do not like him. Number one, you can't
My
trust
God.
anybody spells Will with one L. That's number one. Can't trust him for that. Number two, this was a top prospect where it's like, oh, should the Red Sox trade John Lester and their whole everything that they have right now for Will Myers? This was a top prospect that everyone thought they should give up everything that they have for him because they thought he was going to be some superstar of the future. Will Myers ended up being like a decent player, a one-time all-star, but
Fan
probably
favorite.
more over
Yeah.
yeah, probably more overrated than anything coming up through the system, the way he was talked about
Mhm.
during his time in San Diego. Actually played a pretty long time with the Padres, 8 seasons, and
Yep.
still, even after all that, I don't think he's are you gonna remember Will Myers 20
Yeah.
years from now? You're gonna be telling your
Yeah.
kids about Will?
I'm
Okay,
not gonna be
never mind then.
he's
You
like a
will.
cult favorite. He's a
Okay, you
cult favorite, and
favorite?
as Padres fans, it's really good attitude, never complained, just had his head up, and he was like the first guy. There's like a weird sentimental value to him because he was like the first contract they gave out that was big that the Padres had ever given out. And while it wasn't successful from on the field standpoint, first of all, one of the strangely like most clutch players in the sport in 2020 for some reason. I've never seen anything like it. 2020 Will Myers was the Kingslayer. Like let me tell you, like I don't know what happened that year. He was amazing.
Yeah.
But also like clearly like the community bought everyone shots after they beat the Dodgers in 2022. Like stuff like that. He did a lot of things that Eric Hosmer never did. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like in terms of just acclimating himself and endowing himself with the fan base, and that's why I think he became beloved because it was, yeah, he failed on the field, but you know, He took it in stride. He wasn't like a jerk. He didn't freak out at trade rumors and get insulted by it the way that Eric Hosmer did when someone brought it up one time to him, right? So that's he'll be liked, but I don't think he's going to be one that everyone's like, wow. He's gonna, you know, that joke that's like guys can literally sit in a room and just name players.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be Padres fans. Like, yo, remember Will Myers? You know what I mean? Like that's what he is basically.
Yeah, I just don't like guys who get 20 million a year and just not $20 million players. That's my main thing. So for Will Myers, 1L Will. I don't know where that second L is, but
Speaking of players
okay.
who get
Oh,
$20 million a year who aren't
oh,
worth 20 million,
oh,
ladies and gentlemen, ISO, give me the ISO, give me the ISO.
clear the
My
floor.
number one most hated Diamondback, and arguably one of my most hated players of the last decade plus. I'm not going to say ever because people like Kurt Schilling exist. Um, it is Madison Bumgarner.
Ooh,
And people have been following me for a long time. First of all, what is funny about this pick is that you grew to hate him as well. I
yeah,
won
he would be
two.
number one on my list, most hated D-back
You'd
player
be
since
one of my lists too.
2020. Yeah.
I won two wagers against you because of this man who was giving up
Trust me.
like meatballs down the middle. Will Byers hitting home runs. And here's why I hated him. When he hit that home run, does a slight little thing. And what does Matt Bumgarner do? And what did he do for his whole career? He evil eyes everybody. He is an unwritten rule enthusiast. He is annoying. He's always been like this. There are some comments he has made that frankly have a little bit of an edge to them when he
Mm.
says like, go look up, when he was talking about, it's just I guess that's just what the game is nowadays. Like some coded language. I don't have the exact quote in front of me.
Okay.
I think both you and I and others can discern what I'm trying to get at
Mhm.
with him. If you just look at some of the things he said, and in general, reinforcing this culture that is very anti-personality, very anti people who are different than you, and not just humble pies walking around like this, right? He did that all the time. This is a guy who did that to Jose Fernandez when he hit a home run, a pitcher, and then he evil eyeballed him because he had the gall to admire his shot, no matter what it was. And Will Myers, when he hit a home run off of him, barely did anything. Just started walking, did his little bat flip that he does all the time, by the way. Like that weird flip that he does. It's like not like a this one, but he just goes like this kind of. You know what I mean? That was what he would do. And Madison Bumgarner looking at him the whole time. Hey, how about don't throw a meatball down the middle of the plate? How about that? So many times he did this. He did this with the Giants all the time. And the only reason people didn't give him crap was because he was really, really good. That's why. So everyone ignored him and gave it a pass, but he is emblematic. He is one of the leading avatars of what is so toxic about baseball culture, is that anyone who's different than you, anyone who acts different or celebrates differently than what you grew up with is bad because you're upset that you gave up a home run. And that it just drove me insane. And trust me, there's a whole lot more. But Madison Bumgarner, I will always remember him for being an unwritten rules guy. And it's the last of a dying breed. I think that is one great thing about the game right now. But yeah, couldn't stand him. And he was terrible for the Diamondbacks too. He couldn't
Yeah.
pitch. The only thing that makes him not like my most hated player in general the last few years is because he gave us some free W's. So I
Yeah,
do
he did.
appreciate him for that. But otherwise, couldn't stand him. Couldn't stand him. Still
Yeah.
can't.
Wish I could disagree with anything you said because as a D-backs fan, I don't like the unwritten rules, even when it's your
Yeah.
own player doing it. So
Yeah.
can't really disagree with anything you said there. I mean, honestly, you should be number one on players that you love from the D-backs just because he gave you guys so many W's with all the meatballs he was serving
Sure.
up. Meatball marinara here, meatball marinara there. Madison Bumgarner was absolutely horrendous. And actually, I think his ERA since 2020 might be the worst ERA among starting pitchers in Major League Baseball since he came over to the D-backs. So awful tenure for Mad Bum. And when he's on that Hall of Fame ballot, he better just wipe away all his years post San Francisco because it's not something that he's going to remember. Javi, that's it for our little draft of most hated players from both our teams since 2020. Where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at LO_Padres if you only want Padres stuff. Also, Locked On Padres on YouTube. And also, we alluded to it in the middle of the show, but go check out Just Baseball. Got a lot of cool things in the works for them, including some really cool projects. And then, of course, writing about the Padres, writing about general baseball, and so much more.
Yeah, and for me, at Career Thomas 24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram, Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. Go check out Locked On Padres on YouTube. Please hit subscribe, and we're on wherever you stream podcasts as well. That's Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Until another crossover, sir. Doses.